The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Gwilda Wiyaka's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the Science of Magic or endorsed in any manner by Gwilda Wiyaka, rel-mar Media Company, its affiliated networks, stations, or employees. Welcome to the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, a program dedicated to uncovering the unified nature of reality and humanity's ever-evolving place as truly galactic beings. For more information on the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit us online at www.thescienceofmagic.net.
Welcome to the Science of Magic, a place where science and magic come together to transform fact into evolving truth. We're proudly coming to you through the ever-expanding X-Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net, and can also be found on our website, thescienceofmagic.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. This hour we'll be exploring passages. Indigenous shamanic societies were rich with ritual and ceremony designed to steward the people through life's passages. It was the duty of the shaman of the tribe to create and perform these rituals for his or her people. Eventually, the religions of the culture took over this responsibility. From baptism and marriage to funerals, there's been some sort of provision for ceremonial transition in all faiths. Over the ages, many rituals have been lost, while others have become canned or dogmatic, with little flexibility to customize them to the individual. The art of creating ceremony around the time, season, occasion, and person has virtually been lost. There's much involved in being able to effectively create ceremony. Ritual is empowered by life. In order to align with the way life works, ceremony must follow solid principles, while simultaneously embracing the flexibility needed to accommodate the situation and the participants. Many New Age approaches tend to randomly blend traditions without knowledge of or adherence to ancient principles. Conversely, traditional religious approaches often rigidly follow a protocol that may or may not serve the individuals or the particular situation. In times past, ceremony was performed for most all occasions, rather than just birth, marriage, and death. There were ceremonies for sunrise and sunset, planting, cultivating, harvest, and storing. Rituals were performed for marriage, fertility, pregnancy, birth, naming, coming of age, coming into wisdom for the elders, and for dying. There was a ceremonial support for the grieving, for letting go, and to help the dead to cross. Ritual was performed before, during, and after council. The value of this rich tradition lies in creating a sacred circle as a community, combining intent and blessing to support the members through their process. For example, performing ceremony during the meeting of a council helped the participants align intent and come together in agreement upon a mutual goal as a unified whole, rather than argue a point from personal agenda and desire to control. True ceremony works with earth and star-based alignment. Most incorporate casting a circle grounded in the four directions, blessing the space. Ceremonies include the elements, water, air, earth, and fire, in symbolic form or in physical form, such as holy water, sage, stones, and candles. Every ceremony incorporates male-female balance and evoking divinity through prayer. Ceremony always has a beginning, where intent is set, a middle, during which time the process is engaged, and ends in gratitude. Ceremonial principles were built into physical structures designed for specific ceremonies. The ancient chapels were constructed in alignment with the directions and ley lines of the earth. The Templars were masters of incorporating the power and balance of the earth and stars into their structures. Sacred geometry in the form of architecture and symbols was integrated into the edifice itself. The Native American Nipi, or sweat lodge, is built according to the 7 directions: north, south, east, west, heaven, earth, and center. The Nipi ceremony is based upon the directions, the elements, and prayerful connection with spirit. We're living in unprecedented times. Many of our traditions have fallen by the wayside as cultures and religions blend and ceremonies become watered down or fall away, overcome by events. At the same time, we're in desperate need of ceremony and rituals designed around rapidly changing situations to help us find agreement and stability. Our future depends on finding unity, agreement, and alignment as individuals, cultures, and as a world. We need living ceremony anchored in ancient principles that can cross cultures, religions, and beliefs to unify the people of today. Our guest this hour is SARA KERR. She's a death doula. And after a short break, we will introduce Sarah and we will discuss ceremony and helping the dead to cross. You're listening to The Science of Magic. Prior innovative episodes can always be found on our website, thescienceofmagic.net. Though the world seems in turmoil around us, let's not lose our way. The stars still shine down, blessing us with their light. The sun rises every morning, chasing away the cold and darkness. There are good people of service in this world. We have much to be grateful for as we're wrapped in the arms of all of God's creation. This is Gwilda Wiyaka, host of the Science of Magic Radio, wishing you and yours a very Merry Christmas. I hope your holiday is filled with comfort and joy as you're surrounded by those you love. I'd like to thank all of you for being our loyal listeners on the X-Zone Broadcast Network and for joining us on this grand adventure called life. As the New Year's dawns, let us all stand in truth as we embrace peace. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, dedicated to unification and evolution of consciousness. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is SARA KERR, a death doula, celebrant, and teacher. Drawing on the wisdom of nature-based spirituality, Sarah designs and facilitates ceremonies that help her clients and their families to integrate the experience of illness, death, and loss. These rituals honor the spiritual significance of what's happening and bring held into the living and the dying. Sarah's doctoral dissertation explored the ways that modern Western people can restore and recreate meaningful rituals for significant transitions of life. She has a master's degree in environmental physiology and philosophy, and has been a student of spiritual and shamanic healing modalities since 2000. Her website, soulpassages.com. Sarah, thank you for joining us on The Science of Magic.
Thanks very much, Gwilda. It's great to be here. There's a little typo in your presentation there. It's .ca, not .com.
Yeah, that wasn't a typo. That was a mistake on my part. Sorry about that.
Small detail. It's lovely to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you. So what drew you to ceremonial work in the first place, Sarah?
You know, I have all my life been interested in the experience of working with groups and the dynamic that is developed when a group really gets in tune with itself. Each of the people in the group, there's a kind of field created. And in my 20s, I was a backcountry guide, and so leading extended trips in Alaska and northern Canada, 30 or 40 or 50 days. So we really became a group that was a single body, and we moved together down the river or up the mountain. So that was really fascinating to me. And then in my 30s and early 40s, I did a lot of work in community organizing, again, helping groups come together to create change. So I've really been interested in how that works. And really, ritual is a deeper study of that, because in ritual and ceremony, we're bringing everyone in the process into a similar resonance and frequency in order to make a shift. So it was really a natural transition for me.
It's amazing the power of group when you're in agreement, isn't it?
Yeah, the palpable presence of that field of consciousness is really exciting to work with.
Where'd you get your training in ceremony?
You know, I don't know where I got it. I got it in those places I talked about how to create a space where a group becomes one. I've done a lot of training in quote-unquote shamanic healing and different kinds of energy work. I really have sort of put together my understanding of ritual, gleaning from some of those other things, but there isn't really, I mean, I'm now offering some now, but there aren't really, to my mind, many people who are teaching the real mechanics of the structure of ceremonial space and the architecture of ritual energy. So it's an exciting field.
It's almost been lost. And I teach classes on it, and they're not that common, but the principles they hold true across cultures, don't they?
Yes. Well, I think it's because we're working with objective underlying energetic patterns. They're not cultural patterns. They're fundamental, universal laws about how energy works and how consciousness works and how intention and attention direct energy to a particular goal and how that shifts things and how to bring people into resonance with each other using sound or movement or various different practices. It's really exciting to me how they do transcend culture.
So what would you say is the science behind it? It sounds like you started talking to a little bit to that. Would you mind going into it more?
The science behind it, I don't know that I've ever described it that way. I guess I talk about it as a technology. That's not that different. It's, for me, ceremony is about creating a field of energy that opens a portal, or in some ways you could say a lot of different portals, and allows energy to flow. Western mind tends to see the world as a lot of individual objects, discrete beings all in the same place. And what ceremony does is says, well, yes, we are those things, but actually there's another thing that we are too, which is parts of a larger whole. And when we open up the connections in ourselves to each other and to the living world, to the ancestors, to the future beings, to the spirits of the land, to all the energetic beings we share this world with, it allows the energy to flow through us. There's a beautiful Buddhist image called Indra's net, and it's an ancient way of describing a hologram, that the world is a net of light, all these lines of light, and at each junction in the net is a jewel, and each jewel reflects every other jewel in the net. And I love that image because it gives us a way to describe what's happening in ritual. If we imagine ourselves to be the jewels, we consciously open ourselves to allow the energy that's in the net to flow through us. We give, we receive, we need, we offer, and that's what brings healing back into the system.
Beautifully stated. So would you speak about ceremony tends to transcend time and space, but also it seems like it's pretty important that everybody's present with it. How do those three work together?
Time, space, and the third is being present?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Again, a beautiful Buddhist image of what they call the fourth time. And so in Western mind, a lot of this is about shifting outside of the cultural constraints of what Western thinking has allowed us to do and stepping into a different kind of being. So Western mind tends to see time as a line where the past is behind us, the future is ahead of us. We'll never touch those two, and we live at some moment in the present, which is moving its way along the line. And that keeps the past and the future always separate from us. But the Buddhist concept of the fourth time is that, yes, there's past, present, and future, but there's another time that can be accessed by an altered state of consciousness, which is coming into the present. And so the image they have is not linear, but circular, where the present is the dot in the center, and the past and the future circle around it. so that when we become really deeply present in the moment, we actually open up those gates so that the past and the future are not past and future, they're also here and available. And rituals done now can heal injuries and imbalances from many, many years in the past, and I wonder whether they might not also be able to prevent them from happening in the future. It really is an exciting way when you're in it of, it's like the brain's on a different channel, and linear time doesn't work anymore. When I'm teaching a workshop and I wrap up one session and we try and make a plan to meet again in 10 or 15 or 20 minutes, it is rare that I'm actually able to read the clock. I look at the clock and I have to kind of squint. And I say, okay, when the big hand gets to the 3, that's about as close as I can ever get. It's just the time is not in my consciousness.
I've been there. I understand what you're saying. Do you have to believe in a higher power for ceremony to work?
When I work with dying people and their families, my clients are usually people who would describe themselves to some degree as spiritual but not terribly religious. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they have a religious tradition that really guides them, but it's missing something when they come to me. And they have, most of them, for whatever reason, sort of distance themselves a bit from mainstream religions. But they know that what's happening when someone's approaching death or has died suddenly is a profound soul event, and it asks for a sacred response. And they want, in many ways, they want to pray, but they don't have a language to pray to when a quote-unquote capital G God, often of a Christian background, doesn't speak to them. So I really invite people to connect with what they feel is sacred. Maybe it's love, maybe it's beauty, nature, community, compassion. There's a saying that there are no atheists in a foxhole. So when things get really tough, most people have something that they call on. And so when we're navigating a death and doing a ceremony around a death, we're making prayers for the well-being of this person and for the healing of the community, and we're asking some larger force to sustain and guide, because it's too big to do this alone. But that larger force can be different for everybody. And is compassion a higher power? Well, you might see it that way. I don't get too worked up about those definitions. I just invite people to connect beyond themselves, and that seems to be enough.
Isn't that the first step of hooking into a larger power, is recognizing that you are a larger power and you can reach beyond yourself to connect with others?
Yes, yeah, that's exactly what happens. And it's really profound.
What part do you see gratitude playing in ceremony?
Well, I'm often working in situations where people have a hard time accessing gratitude for what's happening because it's a pretty deep loss in their lives. And so it's not something I necessarily overtly lead with when I come in, because for someone who's facing a death or who's just had a death, asking them what they're grateful for is often not the opening that creates a flow. It often shuts things down. They're not grateful. They're angry. They're sad. There are lots of things, but grateful isn't first on the list. So I don't lead with that. But what happens when we do the ceremonial work that creates connection? And another Canadian teacher named Stephen Jenkinson has a line that I love. He says, "The mark of a good death is that it's a village-making event." Mm-hmm. And I think that's so powerful because there's so many things we can't control about death. We can't control when we die, how old we are. Is it quick? Is it expected? Is it painful? Is it messy? We can't control any of those things. And so if we try and define a good death is one where we're lying in bed at the end of our lives with our family gathered around us and we quietly slip away with some poetic statement. If that's what a good death is, then a lot of us are not going to have that. But if we define the good death as something in which our community comes together, there's more love created in the world, there's more relationship built, more village built, then even really difficult deaths, if they're handled in a ceremonial way, give people an opportunity to really feel the love they have for each other, for the living and for the dead and for those who've died before. We're really building a village on
We're going
both
to have
sides of
to
the river.
we're going to have to pick up with this on the other side of a break. Sarah and I will return to our discussion after this short break. We're coming to you through the land of leading-edge paranormal broadcasting, the X-Zone Broadcast Network. Don't miss the other fine shows and hosts on xzbn.net. You're listening to The Science of Magic, thescienceofmagic.net. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka. We will be back, so don't you go away. Hi, I'm Gwilda Wiyaka. Did you know that shamanism has been around for 50,000 years and practiced by all indigenous cultures? These ancients understood there's more to healing and health than just the physical. All 4 levels, physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, must be addressed in order for us to enjoy healthy, abundant lives. To find quality shamanic healing you can trust, you need look no further than Path Home Long-Distance Shamanic Healing Program. All Path Home practitioners have been trained and certified through Path Home Shamanic Art School, a Colorado State occupational school, and are handpicked, personally trained by me, Gwilda Wiyaka, to uphold the excellence of Path Home's long-distance program. Live abundantly. Schedule a shamanic session with me or one of my quality practitioners today. Call 303-775-3431 or visit findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, a place where magic and science come together to promote enlightenment. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest is SARA Kerr, death doula, celebrant, and teacher and mentor to emerging death doulas. So, would you tell us what a death doula is?
Sure. You know, it's both a kind of a new phenomena and a very old one. It's based on the idea, death doula, death midwife, they're kind of interchangeable words, based on the idea that death and birth are 2 gateways. We come in one, we go out the other. And they're spiritual journeys as much as anything else, and very physical ones too. And the same kind of support is needed at both ends. So death doulas and death midwives, the field of death midwifery, is growing and really defining itself. Different people offer different services within there. My services tend to be more focused on ritual and ceremony, but that's not the only definition of a death doula. That's just really the avenue I've taken it down.
So do you perform psychopump work or helping the dead to cross within your ceremony, or is it a ceremony for the death itself and then the person goes on their way?
No, it's very much, I say my clients are the living, the dying, and the dead, and that a good death, the process of a ritual around a healthy ceremonialized death is of service both to the living and the dead, and to the dead as in the person who is or has just died, but also to the larger dead, our ancestors, who are on the other side. And absolutely the work I do is psychopump work. In much of the sort of classic Western approach to this work, a psychopump work is something somebody does for somebody else. It's like much of Western thought, it's very individual. One person does it for someone else. I actually think that's a pretty limited view of how really this works, and that a more animistic, kind of indigenous perspective is much more holistic. So It's absolutely psychopomp work, but I'm not doing it. It's like I'm the conductor of the orchestra, and the community ceremony itself is the ritual which conveys the person across.
That's very Buddhist in nature, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's very non-Western. It probably would fit into a lot of different cultural traditions outside of Western linear, individualist, materialist culture. So I'm interested in lots of different traditions that say, well, we're more than our individual selves. How do we operate if we take that as a given?
Let's play with this a little bit from a scientific perspective, and I'm just puzzling my way through here. So help me if you can. It seems like when we gather together in ceremonial group, we raise the frequency of the space around us. That creates a sacred space of higher frequency, which helps with transition, because what we're doing when we die is moving from one frequency that's been sustaining the body, leaving the body, and then raising in frequency until we join unity. Does that add up for you?
Yeah, that's not necessarily a way I've thought of it, but yeah, certainly I can't see wouldn't have any argument with that. It's very clear to me that in ceremonial space, we are changing frequency. We're coming into I don't think about it. It doesn't feel to me as necessarily a higher frequency, but I guess it is. It's a clearer one. So yes, in that way it is. We come into a resonance with each other, and we come into a resonance with the living world. So we're more aligned with the part of ourselves that is indivisible. So that's where your word unity would come in. We're more aligned with that net where we are connected to everything, and less aligned with ourselves as a bunch of kind of billiard balls bumping around against each other. So yes, we come in, when we raise our frequency in ceremonial space through all the practices we do, we connect ourselves with the whole, and that allows people to shift. And it's not only the person who's died that's going through a transition, it's everybody in the process. It's really a rite of passage for everyone involved. And so when that ritual space is held correctly, everybody gets to make a shift.
What training would you suggest a person to get in order to responsibly create and perform ceremony for others? Because we're working on behalf of others when we do that. What would you suggest for people that are interested in taking this up?
Well, I really feel like I had to feel my way through, over many years, through a lot of different things that pointed me in the right direction and that altogether have given me the experience and the skills I need. But there's not a step A, B, C, start here, end here, you'll have it figured out kind of training. I mean, I offer some trainings and other people offer bits and pieces. It really is about, I think, for individuals interested in this, coming to be clear about what your personal gift is. Some people do ceremonial work and use music. Some people use dance. There are different ways to shift spaces, but training, I would say a lot of it is developing your own personal medicine body and having a lot of experience going in and out of ceremonial space. It's a muscle you develop, and the more often you do it, the more facile it becomes, the more you're able to shift into it consciously. And when I'm working with groups, it's like I just turn the radio dial in my energy field and I put myself in a different configuration. And that is a huge part of what allows the rest of the group to go there, because I'm already, it's like a tuning fork. So that would be a big part of it, is the personal transformation in your energy body. And then some of the practice and skills around working with fields of consciousness, that I think has been really helpful for me.
It would appear the person performing the ceremony actually has a great deal of power at their disposal with the agreement of the participants. What's the importance of consciousness and integrity in performing ceremonies?
No, it's the most important. When I'm working with my students, where people are learning to do ceremony well, there's a way, when I talked about switching that radio dial in my energy body, it's into this frequency of connectedness and out of the frequency of the personal. So I disappear. what I like or want or think about what's going on, it's as if that just goes in the next room. And when the ceremony's over, I'll come back. That's a normal part of being human. But to be able to lead a ceremony well, that can't be in the space. And it's that connection with the whole, which by definition is about integrity and authenticity and connection with unity and love. It's that allows the gate to open. So there are certainly ways of doing ceremonies that bring about ill results, and that's not something I actually have done much exploring of. I'm not really particularly interested in learning how to do that, but certainly people can shift fields of consciousness for ill as well as good.
Right. That was my next question, is can harm be done through ceremony?
Yes. When we look at Hitler's Germany, they used powerful ceremonial techniques to shift mass consciousness, activating ancient Norse archetypes. There was a lot of ceremonial skill in what they did. So yes, it can. That's a pretty extreme example. I think that people doing ceremony with their friends and family or with themselves, I don't think we're looking at that much power. And I don't know, I don't see a lot of opportunity for, if the ceremony is not true, then it can be damaging. So at a funeral, if the officiant talks about the person who's died as if they were a saint, when perhaps the person was actually anything but a saint, it's not a healing ceremony. People don't come away feeling like they've had a resolution because it's felt like a lie. Mm-hmm. It's better to say, and all his life he struggled with alcohol, and he really wasn't the father you wished he could have been. And that's part of what you're grieving. To speak that truth creates healing. To pretend that none of those things happened, I don't know whether it causes damage, but it certainly doesn't create healing.
One time I was at a wedding where the officiant gave a big lecture on divorce. And it's like the frequency in the room just dropped. Would you speak to the power of words as it relates to ceremony?
Oh, it's one of my favorite topics. I talk about word magic, that words are almost like surgical tools, and they shift the space. Words have ancient power. In the beginning was the Word. Words are vibration. Words carry such a huge train of energy behind them. And there's a kind of ceremonial speech, and it needs not to be affected or artificial sounding, but it comes with that shifting the radio dial. It's a different kind of speech, whereas an officiant, I'm not speaking what I think or what I need to hear. I'm feeling into the space and feeling what's needed and giving words to what's needed. So taking that underlying field of energy, bringing it up into consciousness in language in a different way, and then using language to take us from one place to another. If there's one energetic pattern and we need to move to a different kind of pattern, words can be part of what flow is there. And the right words, I know I've said them when people in the room go, oh, there's a response that just ripples through the crowd when people hear what really needs to be said. So words are profoundly powerful in ceremony.
So what I hear you saying, and I have experience of doing this as well, is that when you're in ceremony, you're listening to the response of the participants and then echoing back the next words that need to be spoken to go to the next step?
No. I'm listening below the response of the participants. The participants are often, especially around a death, the participants are so undone. The rug has been pulled out from underneath them. Someone they love has died. They are they often don't even know what they would need or want next. So I feel into this energy in the room, and I feel it. It's palpable. I feel stickiness or heaviness or friction, or sometimes there's colors or light or dark. Where is something stuck? Oh, something's stuck because, and then what are the words? Or sometimes it's gesture. Words and gesture together. That's the other important part of ceremony.
We're going to have to pick up on this one on the other side, so it's a bit of a cliffhanger. I'm sorry. Sarah and I will be back shortly. You're listening to The Science of Magic, thescienceofmagic.net, the place where altruistic professionals of science and the esoteric create common ground for the betterment of our world. We're brought to you by the leader in paranormal, spirituality, and alternative health programming, the X Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net. Though the world seems in turmoil around us, let's not lose our way. The stars still shine down, blessing us with their light. The sun rises every morning, chasing away the cold and darkness. There are good people of service in this world. We have much to be grateful for as we're wrapped in the arms of all of God's creation. This is Gwilda Wiyaka, host of the Science of Magic Radio, wishing you and yours a very Merry Christmas. I hope your holiday is filled with comfort and joy as you're surrounded by those you love. I'd like to thank all of you for being our loyal listeners on the X Zone Broadcast Network and for joining us on this grand adventure called life. As the New Year's dawns, let us all stand in truth as we embrace peace. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, bringing together gifted people of service to the world. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is SARA KERR, death doula, celebrant, and teacher, and mentor to the emerging death doulas. Sarah, how do you help others learn to do this work?
I live in Calgary, and we're really growing quite a community here, which is really exciting to me that it's happening locally. So there's a group that gathers monthly, and we're talking about, in general, deathly practices in service, so bringing together people who offer different kinds of support to dying people and their families. And then I teach workshops, and I host a monthly gathering called the Community Healers Council, which is, we call it a community of practice for ritual leaders. And it's not teaching in the terms of standing up with a flip chart, delivering teaching. It's a little bit of what I talked about earlier in terms of how do we change ourselves. And it's work based on the work of a teacher of mine named Dina Metzger, and she had a beautiful line. She said, how do we become the ones that spirits trust to carry the healing into the future? So that's what that gathering does. So it's a collection of those things, workshops, and this year I'm getting organized to do some online teaching and resource development too. So in any way I can, really.
Very nice. And how can people find your services?
Through my website, which is www.soulpassages.ca. Passages is plural, and it's CA because I'm in Canada. And it's all listed there. I list my events, and I have a newsletter, and people can download, when they sign up to the newsletter, there's a holistic death resource kit they can download that has a lot of books and resources and organizations around ceremony and non-ordinary approaches to death and dying and what happens afterwards.
What a beautiful provision. Thank you for providing that for people. So, are we more vulnerable to suggestion and imposed beliefs when we're in a ceremonial setting? I mean, you were talking about the Hitler's reign.
Hmm. Uh, I don't know. I think we're yes. So those practices around actually creating ceremony to create harm. Yes, I think that's a very small part and one that doesn't enter my thoughts very often. But what we are is more vulnerable. So when people come into ceremony, they open themselves. They open their hearts. They open their awareness. They open their connection. And it's kind of a two-part process because people really only open when they feel safe, when they trust. And so the way to create that opening is to build a container of safety. So vulnerability and safety go hand in hand. People, if they don't feel safe, they don't allow themselves to be vulnerable. I suppose, and this is not really something that's, I think, very common or very relevant, but I suppose you could, by creating a whole lot of safety and a whole lot of trust, create an opportunity where people are really open and vulnerable, and then throw in something that is unsafe, and yes, it would cause damage. But it's not, I don't think, necessarily the way most often it happens. Mostly whoever is involved in creating the ceremony does it by creating safety and trust, and that continues.
Right. So some ceremonies like marriage can create a conscious binding. Can you speak to this, and how would you break the binding should the marriage or the no longer serve?
Same way you make it, ceremonially.
There you go.
It's which is a kind of a sassy answer, but it's ceremonies establish energetic lines of connection and configuration. So in a marriage, there are a lot of things that happen. The two people come together, the two families come together. So you create not only a husband and a wife, or a wife and a wife, or a husband and a husband, whatever that looks like, but you also create mother-in-laws and father-in-laws and sister-in-laws and brother-in-laws and a whole set of configurations of new identities. And it's done with the statement, I do, which we talked about word magic. That, in a ritual situation, those words change something. You are forevermore married. Even if you get unmarried half an hour later, you have been married. And so to really cleanly come apart, you need a ceremony with a similar gravitas. It may not need to be as large as a wedding is, but it needs to have enough intention that I did, but now I don't. And that some ritual action that says it was and now it is something different, and I leave that. And I think that's the reason many people struggle with lots of transitions is because they're ceremonially entered into them, but not supported to leave them.
It's so true. I think that I personally think it has a lot to do with why people struggle so with divorce and remarriage. When they marry somebody else, they're still bound to somebody from the first marriage, and they just struggle a lot for the lack of a simple ceremony to unbind what we consciously bound together. I think it's so important. So why do you think it's important for modern Western people to restore and recreate rituals for transitions?
Well, a little bit of what you just spoke to is that if we don't make transitions well, we end up dragging a big bag of rocks behind us into the next phase of our life. And it's not only marriage, but any transition. Transitions are both a birth and a death. They're the birth of something new and the death of what was. So even people who are getting married, there's a death of the single person. And sometimes that can be hard to let go of. And marriages don't work because people didn't really let go of who they were as single people. Or when there's a literal physical death in a community, in a family, people need to let in themselves die the person they were in relation to that other person in their physical presence. That's why we have words like orphan and widow, that we develop new identities when someone dies. And at each of the little and large deaths and rebirths along our soul's path, a ceremony can help us. It's almost like the punctuation and grammar in a sentence. The ceremony can be a period, so a new sentence can start. It has that's a real energetic. I feel in my body that way. It's a flow. We've been in one sentence, and then we have to end that one. And when we end it well, then we can begin the next one.
So would you speak to birthing into death? How's dying like being born?
Well, if you take a larger cosmological perspective on what life is, to say that life and death are not opposites. Birth and death are opposites. Life includes them both. It's fall here in North America and going into winter. Trees are dropping, plants are dying. That's all the ending of things. But in the spring, that dead plant material will be the compost out of which new life comes. So death and birth cycle around and around. Life includes them both. And if we look at our own lives as that way, and my experience and my perspective is that we make this journey into physical bodies more than once, and there's a cycling around where we come into physical form and we go out. And as we're coming into physical form, we're dying to our energetic form, and we're being born into physical. As we die to physical form, we're being born back into energetic, and the circle goes around, and it actually spirals. If we do it enough times and we learn the lessons, we might move up out of that. But that everything is a birth to one thing and a death to another.
That being the case, do you believe that the quality of our approach to death can dictate the quality of our next time around?
I believe the quality of our entire life dictates the approach of our life dictates many of our experiences the next time around. But then the other thing is also true. How much of what happens when we're not in physical body is determining what happens when we come in. Are we choosing these lives because of lessons we need? So yes, I think they're both connected and they're on a continuum.
It's a very interesting perspective, isn't it? Because, in our Western society, we assume that you have one life and you die. A lot of times people look at it that way. If we think that we keep doing this, that this is an opportunity to move up the rung, if you will, in experience, I think we might live our lives a little differently, don't you?
Yes. And I think we might meet our deaths a little differently. Right now, if death is considered as the absolute end, non-existent chasm of emptiness, it's terrifying. No wonder we're all avoiding in any way we can as a society that approach. But if we have a bigger perspective that says death is the next step, and there's a step after that, and there's a step after that, and it's just the next step, it makes it not such a terrifying prospect.
Beautifully put. Beautifully put. Time flies, and unfortunately, we are out of it, Sarah. Thank you so much for being with me on The Science of Magic.
Well, I really appreciate it. It's been lovely, Gwilda. Thank you for having me.
You bet. Our guest this hour has been SARA KERR, death doula, celebrant, and teacher, and mentor to emerging death doulas. Her website is soulpassages.ca. This has been The Science of Magic. Remember, you can always listen to thought-provoking episodes on our website, thescienceofmagic.net. Until next time, dear ones, may you be blessed with knowledge and comforted with love as you embrace all of life's passages.
One people, one nation, searching through the night. One people, one nation.